When you're losing your sense of hope, what becomes your ground? What are the values that you want to be living out in your life? It's a dirty process, like in the best way.
Welcome to Climate Changed, a podcast from the BTS Center. I'm Autumn Brown, artist, theologian, mother, and freedom worker. Here, we ask what it means to live, to love, and to lead in a climate-changed world.
And I'm Reverend Nicole Diroff, Associate Director at the BTS Center. Together, we're exploring how spiritual leadership takes shape in these uncertain times.
For you listening, we love to hear from you. If something in this conversation stirs you or inspires an idea or a story, please email or leave a voice message. Today's conversation is with Rabbi Ora Nitkin-Kaner, a climate change chaplain who helps people name what they're feeling in a world that's unraveling. As you listen, notice how she speaks about the power of naming, the sacredness of grief, and the courage to hold one another through uncertainty.
Rabbi Ora helps individuals and communities find meaning in the midst of loss. Her work reminds us that spiritual leadership is less about answering questions. Her work reminds us that spiritual leadership is less about offering answers and more about accompanying people as they discover what sustains them.
As we do in each of our episodes, we've prepared a grounding practice to center us and prepare us for the conversation ahead.
Today, we are pleased to welcome poet Catherine Pierce and her poem, Anthropocene Pastoral.
The poem first appeared in the American Poetry Review and was later collected in Catherine's book, Danger Days. It's become one of her most recognized works, an uncanny meditation on wonder, unease, and the fragile beauty of a planet in flux. The poem even inspired a short art film exploring biodiversity loss and the emotional landscape of the climate crisis.
For this recording, Catherine collaborated with sound artist and our producer, Peterson Toscano, who created the audio design you're about to hear.
Here is Anthropocene Pastoral.
Anthropocene Pastoral. In the beginning, the ending was beautiful. Early spring everywhere. The trees furred pink and white. Lawns the sharp green that meant new. The sky so blue it looked manufactured. Robins. We'd heard the cherry blossoms wouldn't blossom this year, but what was one epic blooming when even the desert was an explosion of verbena? When bobcats slinked through primroses, when coyotes slept deep in orange poppies. One New Year's Day, we woke to daffodils, wisteria, onion grass wafting through the open windows. Near the end, we were eyeletted. We were cottoned. We were sundressed and barefoot. At least it's starting gentle, we said. An absurd comfort, we knew, a placebo. But we were built like that. Built to say, at least. Built to reach for the heat of skin on skin, even when we were already hot. Built to love the purpling desert in the twilight. Built to marvel over the pink bursting dogwoods, to hold tight to every pleasure, even as we rocked together toward the graying. Even as we held each other, warmth to warmth, and said, sorry, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, while petals sifted softly to the ground all around us.
Thank you, Catherine, for this poem, for writing it, and thank you for sharing it with Climate Changed.
That was Catherine Pierce reading Anthropocene Pastoral. You can learn more about her books and projects at catherinepiercepoet.com, including the film inspired by this poem. Rabbi Ora Nitkin-Kaner is a Reconstructionist rabbi and climate change chaplain whose work centers on helping people name their grief, anxiety, and longing in the face of environmental upheaval. Through one-on-one sessions and community groups, she guides people to discover compassion and connection as forms of resilience. Let's listen. Ora, welcome to the show. Thank you for being a part of this season of Climate Change. It's such an honor to have you here.
Thank you, Autumn. It's really an honor to be speaking with you. I'm so excited for our conversation.
Me too. The show is about spiritual leadership in a climate changed world. But this season, we're really looking at that through the lens of chaplaincy. You're the only person on our guest list who self-identifies as a climate chaplain. Wait, you might be the only person in the world. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's more of you, but I'm sure there's more of you out there. But when I was looking into your work, I thought you've really stepped into a particular vocation around climate crisis, collapse, and chaplaincy.
There are dozens and dozens and dozens of folks who are doing this work, whether they call themselves climate chaplains, climate change chaplains, eco chaplains. This is a field that a few years ago was in its nascent stages. I think almost no one had heard about climate change chaplaincy, but now, thanks to different organizations, thanks to different leaders, thanks to the BTS Center in large part, a lot of folks who are spiritual care practitioners are finding their way to this work and to the vital question of our time, which is, how do I live? How do I be a person and maybe more than human in a climate changing world? I'm so grateful to have folks who are joining me in this work. So I am trained as a Reconstructionist rabbi. My first love in this work is chaplaincy. I have had the opportunity to work in hospital settings, to work with elders in senior care facilities, to do some work with folks in hospice, and also to do some work and some volunteering in prisons. In all those spaces, I was showing up and offering a ministry of presence, really a witnessing and a listening role, which is what chaplaincy really is. I found the work to be profound and really important, and a place where I felt most connected to the sacred. Starting in 2017, I spent 5 years working as the rabbi of a congregation in Michigan. That time period was a time of a lot of changes for a lot of us, individually and collectively. When the pandemic started and seemed like it wasn't going anywhere, everyone was scrambling to make sense of the time that we were living through. I was hearing a lot of people using the word apocalypse to describe what was happening or what they imagined would be coming soon. And sometimes that was a little tongue in cheek, and sometimes it was serious, and sometimes it was like interesting meld of the two going back and forth. I started to ask myself, what happens to us when we feel like we're living in a time of extended apocalypse? And what happens to bodies, to our hearts, to our spirits, to our minds when all we can see is ending?
When you say all we can see, do you mean like all that we see as in everything is ending, or all that we see as in like all we're capable of seeing is things that look like they're ending?
Both.
Both. Okay.
Yeah. Both. Yeah. Yeah. And therefore not seeing the beginnings that come after each ending and the possibilities that come after each ending. I realized that folks need support and need care when it feels like the world is falling apart and when it feels like we are falling apart because the world is also disintegrating. So I started looking into, is climate change chaplaincy a thing? Does this exist?
Hmm.
And I came across some folks who were leaders in the field even before it coalesced to become a field, and
Wow.
spent a couple years learning and preparing myself to transition out of my role as a congregational rabbi and into my role, which I've been lucky enough to be doing full time since 2022, of being a climate change chaplain and an educator around climate chaplaincy.
Wow. And what are some of the environments that you are working in now? Can you give an example of what a typical day in the life of a climate change chaplain looks like?
It's a great question. And I will say that you may have heard my 4-month-old baby crying slightly in the background.
Yes, yes, I did.
Apologies.
No apology needed. It's one of my favorite sounds.
She is having feelings. We're all having feelings.
We're all
Some of us are better at expressing them than others, naturally.
right, right. Oftentimes children will just express what everyone else is feeling.
Yes, yes,
Mhm.
truth. I think if I had told you what a day in my life is in this moment, it would sound chaotic and it would be mostly governed by a tiny being.
Yes, yes.
Just to give you an example of something that I am doing when I am not wearing my parenting hat,
Mhm.
when I'm wearing my climate chaplain hat, I am leading the third cohort of a support group for people in their 20s, 30s, 40s,
Hmm.
thinking about wrestling with whether to become parents, given the reality of the fact that we live in a climate changing world and in a world of many other changes.
Wow. Yeah, I have a lot of curiosity around climate feelings, both the ones that are named and the ones that are unnamed. So, in your work, what do you notice it tends to be the unexplored or underexplored, below the surface emotions that people are having about what's happening in the world? In terms of the actual chaplaincy element of your work, I'm curious to know what becomes possible for people when there's someone else who's holding space and tuning to them emotionally.
Hmm.
What are you noticing in your work as a chaplain becomes possible for the folks who are coming to you once they are having the experience of emotional attunement?
Yeah. You said that you're particularly curious about climate feelings. And I love that you call them climate feelings because the phrase that's more commonly used is climate emotions. Both of those words, both climate or the phrase climate change and emotions, are clinical and sanitized. They're just sort of hard to hold. You named it climate feelings. Yeah, I would call it what? I would call it no. I would call it, oh. It's important to really get down to like the nitty gritty of what are we actually talking about.
You're picking up on, like, calling it feelings as opposed to something more clinical. The what is the thing that's actually happening inside of us, which is maybe below language? It's like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and we know, that being able to name what we're experiencing is deeply necessary for us as human beings. When we don't have the ability to name our experience, we can't claim it. It's often hard for us to really fully register that it's happening. And so, in a climate chaplaincy session, because I work also one on one with individuals, as a chaplain, I'm holding space for folks to name what they're experiencing so that it becomes legible to themselves so that they can carry it to their loved ones, to their communities, and render it legible for the folks from whom they want comfort or from whom they need care or folks that they want to organize with or fight alongside. It can be a profoundly validating experience, but I think of it as necessary. We need to be witnessed. We need to be seen. We need someone to tell me. We need someone to tell us, you're not alone with this in order to be present to our own reality. Validating folks' experiences is one really key piece of climate chaplaincy. I have a somatic orientation and a trauma informed orientation to my work. So, for folks who are open to it, I'll invite them to go into the body and
Mm.
to figure out how their body is reacting to living in a time of change. Also, I try to help folks grapple with the deep truths of our time.
Mm.
So much of what we expected that our futures would look like is being lost. So much of the promises of modernity, of endless expansion, endless pursuit of perfection, the future will always be better than the past. There will always be enough for all of us to be grappling with the reality that these truths, maybe they were probably never true, but it's really coming to light now that they are not true and they are not going to be truths that can carry us into the future. That involves profound loss. When you're losing your ground, when you're losing your orientation, when you're losing your sense of hope, what becomes your ground? What are the values that you want to be living out in your life? What are the values that you want to be acting out of? It's a rich process. It's a dirty process, like in the best way, like
Mm.
dirt, meaning like it's feeling around because none of us have answers in this time, right? We're all just figuring it out together. We're moving through and with uncertainty, and we're also playing with that uncertainty. I mean, we're living in a time of a lot of loss, a lot of fear, a lot of
Mm.
rage. It's important to not lose our ability to play, to laugh, and to invite one another into joy. It's not so much new ground, it's old ground.
Mm.
People are hungry, increasingly, like surprisingly hungry for connections to spirituality, for connections to culture, their own culture before it was erased or whitewashed or eaten by capitalism.
Mhm.
People are hungry for connections to ancestors and for connection to the more than human world, to trees, to earth, to water, to air, to animals. The vast majority of us are raised with values around care and compassion. I'm definitely seeing this as a new parent. We come in a state of profound vulnerability. We need to lean on one another, that we need to be cared for by one another. It's a turning back to the values that turn us towards care for one another. And those are sandbox values also, right? Like they're the values that as parents, as community members, we're teaching our youngest folks. So I think that's what I'm seeing people hungry for. That's also part of why I don't only work one on one with folks as a
Yeah.
climate chaplain. It's also really important to be helping co create community.
Mm.
I'm working as a climate change chaplain right now. When I tell people what I do, they have a tendency to either be quite curious about it or to push themselves away from it and to say, that sounds really hard. Like I can't imagine getting so close to the fear and the anger and the grief. Like how do you do that? There's an instinctive desire to, I think, push away from what hurts.
Wow. Wow.
So you could say, like, oh, I have special skills, a special ability as a chaplain to be with people walking through this time. And I do have certain skills and I do have certain training, but also we are all completely capable of walking alongside one another and of holding one another through this time. We have this inherent human need to hold one another and care for one another. The way that climate change is playing out for many of us in the Western world is we're we're seeing climate change. We're seeing climate disaster on the news, on social media. We're reading about it. It's a bit of a fire hose. We're overwhelmed by the
Mm.
stories. We're overwhelmed by the suffering. But also, because it's mediated, because we're hearing the stories of suffering of others, we don't actually have the opportunity to be with the people who are suffering. We're only really kind of absorbing it secondhand or third hand. That really robs us of our agency of care. It makes us kind of impotent.
Interesting.
When we look at the word compassion, it means to suffer with. When we're suffering with, it's very active. It's not passive. It's presence. It's not receiving from a distance.
Mm,
When we slow down enough to truly see and hear and feel with another person, that is needed not just by the other person, but also by
yeah.
us. And we can all do that. We all need that.
Yes. I really appreciate you lifting this piece up about what it is that as humans we're actually primed for. It's not just that we're primed to receive support, we're also primed to give support. One of the unique elements of being socially grouped creatures and cooperative, like biologically orientated towards cooperation and having a togetherness culture is that
Yes.
we actually require the ability to show up for one another under stress. I just finished writing a book about how to practice freedom in an unfree world.
Mm. Mm.
How did we end up here?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so excited to read your book when it comes out. I just want to be very clear that I don't want folks who are listening to this conversation to think, "Oh, I need to fling myself uh, into the suffering of the world and live there forever." That's not what I'm saying.
Right, listeners, just so you know, we're not saying to go make everyone else's problems yours.
But there's something powerful, and I'm going to use the word holy. There's something
Hey,
powerful and holy about being with another person who is struggling. And there is something powerful and holy about allowing someone else to be with us when we are in pain, when we are suffering, when we are experiencing loss.
mm,
And I say being with because I think being with means I'm sitting next to you and I'm holding your hand. Or if that's not possible, being with means I'm having a phone call with you. It doesn't mean I am scrolling through social media for hours every day and being flooded by the grief of the world. We're not designed to do that as embodied beings. That's not possible for us, and it's not sustainable, and it's not kind.
agreed. Hard agree. Okay, a couple of times in this conversation, you've referenced the more than human world. And earlier, you said, how do I be more than human in a climate changing world? Which, as a science fiction and speculative fiction writer, I was like, I love that question. Or what do you mean?
Yeah, the phrase more than human world is from David Abram, Abram. He's an American ecologist and philosopher. So I want to give credit where credit is due. My understanding of that phrase is that he came up with the more than human world as a way of expanding our sense of what we mean when we say the natural world. We tend to divide up the world between the human world,
Mm,
world of concrete and computers, human bodies, and the natural world.
so out there.
Yeah, out there. We're here, it's out there. That's not real, right? We are beings on this planet. We are made of stardust. We are made of dirt. We are made of one another's exhale breath.
We're made of parasites.
Yeah, we're made of parasites. Yeah.
What's not inside of us?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And where do we end, right? Where do we end and does the world begin? But that, that's we could go on.
Right.
So the more than human world is an acknowledgement of everything that exists beyond the limits of our body, and recognizes also that as human beings, as Homo sapiens, we are simply one species in a world on a planet that is teeming with millions upon millions. How can we be learning from other species about how to survive times of leanness, how to evolve, how to care for one another, how to reach across boundaries, how to make sure that everyone is nourished in a time of scarcity? So that's what I mean when I mean becoming more than human.
Beautiful. Right. What are the patterns that are naturally occurring as all of the different species on Earth respond to the changing conditions that we could learn from, that we could mimic? Because there's also places in nature where we're seeing both ends of it. We're seeing the part, what it looks like when we can adapt. We're seeing what it looks like when we can't adapt. And that's both within our human understanding. It's also in ecosystems. We can see when ecosystems are too fragile to be able to adapt in time for
Yes.
how rapidly the conditions are changing also. Wow. I have another question for you that's about language. I was so delighted when you brought up the meaning of the word compassion, because I am also a word nerd.
Same.
I'm a word nerd. And I saw on your website that you wrote about how the word apocalypse means to reveal. I'm curious to know how the idea of something being revealed, or the idea of revelation, shows up in your spiritual work. And also just curious to know what you think that this time period is revealing to us about people, planet, society, spirituality, the role of spiritual practice. What are some of the things that are getting revealed or detangled in such a way that we can look at them differently?
Just a little question like that.
You know, because you said words and now I'm saying words. Words, words, words.
Rich questions. All right. Yes. So the name of my climate chaplaincy practice is Exploring Apocalypse,
Hey.
which is a long URL.
Right. Apocalypse is a long word.
So we'll start with it with apocalypse. As a fellow word nerd or of etymology, when in the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, I was hearing folks use the word apocalypse to refer to the present and future. The moment that I decided, okay, this is something that really needs my attention, this is a reasonable direction for me to orient myself towards, to move away from congregational work and to try to become a climate change chaplain, was when I went for a hike in like the woods of Michigan with my partner. There weren't very many people on the hike. We were hiking for a couple hours. At some point on our hike, we saw a couple people coming towards us. And as they got within earshot, they were using the word apocalypse to talk about the present moment. And I was like, okay, noted, noted. And then maybe half an hour, 45 minutes later, another group of people were coming along. When they got within earshot, we heard that they were also using the word apocalypse to talk about the present moment.
That is fascinating.
I do not think that this was an apocalypse focused hiking group that
Right.
had, where its numbers had spread out. It became really clear to me that that was how people were feeling about the moment. And so I was asking myself, as a Jew, as a rabbi, not as a Christian clergy person, what does apocalypse mean to those folks that I was literally crossing paths with? What is apocalypse? What does apocalypse look like and feel like for them? I went and read the book of Revelations in the Christian Bible.
Freaky, freaky ass book.
Really freaky things, terrible devastation happening both to humans, by humans, and within the natural world.
Yes.
Raining blood, armies slaughtering untold millions. that version, that's the vision of apocalypse that we have from the Christian tradition that I think like lives somewhere vaguely inside a lot of us. But what does it mean for apocalypse not just to be this distant thing that happens on a religious or mythic timeline, but is actually happening to us in the present? And so, word nerd, I went and looked up etymology of apocalypse. It comes from the Greek and it simply means to reveal. That's where we get revelations from, but also just to uncover. So, what is this time revealing about the world? What is this time revealing about ourselves and our capacities to respond rather than simply react to change?
And what do you think?
I think that we are losing more than we have the time or space to grieve. I think that we're so angry. We feel betrayed by those who are supposed to be committed to our well-being and to our care, our collective well-being and collective care. I think we're afraid. We are afraid of future climate disaster if it's already impacted us. I think we're afraid of future climate disaster if it hasn't yet impacted us, but we're wondering when it's going to show up on our doorstep. I think we are looking for a new way of understanding the world and our role in it and our capacity to act and to act from a place of care. I think we need a revolution, but that's just me and maybe other people as well.
I'm sure you are not alone on that one. The beginning of this year, I had a really powerful conversation with a longtime friend and colleague of mine, Ron Boucher, about the Christian nationalist orientation to apocalypse.
Mm.
That conversation helped me really understand something that I did not up until that point understand about why there are forces at work inside of Earth and inside of government, institutions of governance that seem to be intentionally hastening conditions of climate collapse as opposed to intentionally fighting them or trying
Yes.
to subvert or revert or heal or repair. There is a contingent, pretty radical contingent of Christian extremists who have a very politicized orientation to hastening the conditions of collapse so as to bring about the conditions that are prophesied in the book of Revelation. It was such helpful politicization for me in terms of understanding from the beginning of the industrial age, people have been warning about this moment. It's none of this is new, and I'm not saying Christian extremists are alone to blame for why we're here, but certainly the level of political power that they have accrued, particularly over the last 40 years, has been an influencer in why we've been unable to really take some of the steps that have been needed. And here we are then unable to reverse some pretty significant things that are about to happen. Everything you're speaking to, the grief that you're speaking to, that sense that we are losing more and we are about to lose more than we really have the adequate time and space to deal with and grieve, is as much a political condition as it is a spiritual condition, right? And it makes me think about who are the people and the traditions and who are the people who have lost everything and have had to come into a new relationship with community, with land. What are some of the theologies that are available inside of your tradition that really help make meaning of this level of loss?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you asked that. Stories are the bread and butter of the, maybe not bread and butter. They're the, what does bread and butter mean? What does that phrase mean?
I understand it as the most basic thing you could have in your kitchen. So I'm like,
Great.
what's the most basic thing you would have in a Jewish kitchen?
So this will be a lot of mixed metaphors. And I would say that not literally, but metaphorically, the bread and butter in the rabbinic kitchen of, 700 years ago was stories, was taking the core text of the Torah, the Hebrew Bible, and playing with it and turning it again, and essentially writing fan fiction around the core stories of the Torah to try to grapple with those difficult narratives, to try to grapple with, a God who didn't live up to our best expectations, to try to grapple with ancestors who didn't live up to our best expectations. So for me, stories are a place to go for nourishment, for learning, for orientation and reorientation in a world that seems to be spinning. I can share a couple stories. In Judaism, in Hebrew, it's called midrash. One midrash that I find myself coming back to again and again is the midrash, the story of Adam and Eve. We find it in the Talmud, a response to the story of creation. God creates the world within 6 days. On the seventh day, God rests. God creates human beings, Adam and Eve, late afternoon on the sixth day. And so in this midrash, we have Adam and Eve, these full human beings, these adults, and they're in Eden and everything is beautiful and perfect and Edenic and idyllic. And then the sun starts setting, and Adam and Eve have never experienced night before.
Shit.
Yeah. So they are panicked. They are grief stricken. They turn to each other and say, "What is happening? What do we do?" They turn to God for some sense of what is going on. And there isn't a response from God. They just have to live through the darkness, but then come out of the darkness with dawn. The next morning, they look at each other and say to each other, "This must be how the world works, a time of coming darkness and then light again." And that's not where the story ends, because guess what happens with the first winter?
Oops.
Yeah, Adam and Eve are losing their minds again. And we imagine that the world is coming to an end. They live through the winter, they do survive. Then spring comes. What this beautiful midrash says to me, and I would love to hear, how it lands with you, is that endings are an inevitable part of living in our world. Endings happen. It's completely normal to be afraid when change is coming, when we see or we think we see that things are coming to an end. Because that fear response to change is really built into us as human beings from the first human beings, from Adam and Eve. But we also have this built in knowing that change is survivable, that change isn't the end, that change is endings, and from endings also beginnings.
Oh my God, I love this. I love the story. I love the imagery of Adam and Eve being like, "Oh my God."
Yeah. I mean, imagine if we put ourselves in their not shoes, because they were naked.
Because they were naked. Can you imagine night falling and you're naked?
Terrifying. There's leopards around, there's snakes.
The snakes can talk. Oh, it's so good, Aura. That's such a great example. There's also something too. I feel like I've picked this up every time I've read the early texts of the Torah. There's something too that like God is so messy in that part of the spiritual text. Like you really have this sense of like, man, you really don't know what you want, do you? Like you're being so messy. Just in the midrash, the sense of like, then we turned to God and God just wasn't there and didn't answer. And just like, where did God go? you know?
Yes.
There's a humor in that, but also I think like a realness. There's a lot of messiness happening. There's a lot of messiness happening that interrupts the desire that we often have to be able to like vest the sort of greater divinity, greater reality with morally upright position, that everything is moving towards moral uprightness at all times. And it's like, the evidence doesn't suggest that. That's not what the evidence suggests. There's something else happening. And I love this way of making meaning of that something else, that it's like, yeah, actually things are scary. Yeah. Even in God's world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. And I also want to say God throughout the Torah, throughout the Hebrew Bible, not just in the beginning, but throughout, is
Throughout.
messy and incredible. I mean, we get to wrestle with that messiness.
An absolute artist.
And our ancestors are messy, and we get to wrestle with that messiness. The rabbis have been, learned Jewish folks have been wrestling with this messiness for thousands of years. There's a 12th century French philosopher rabbi who goes by the acronym of Radak. Because we have in Genesis, in the very beginning of creation, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and it was tohu vavohu. It was complete chaos. Radak is asking, why does our story of creation start with chaos? Like, why not just start with God created the world and everything was great? Why is there this specific naming that chaos happens before creation? He says the reason God didn't create Earth in its completed state is to show the people on Earth that Earth had not always existed, but had been created. It seems like we're meant to understand chaos is the starting point. Chaos isn't the end. It's generative. The Jewish tradition is teaching us that our world was created out of chaos, was created out of darkness. It means that we don't deny that darkness exists and that we see it clearly for what it is, which is a starting place.
Wow. Right. The generative material of life.
Yeah.
And through which a life is made.
Yeah.
Incredible. Incredible. Ora, that is such a beautiful place for us to land. A beautiful way of reframing what it is that we're living through, moving deeper into, and moving through also. As a final question, one of the questions that we're asking all of our guests is, what is a practical next step that people who are listening to this conversation can take, particularly people who are in some way holding some kind of spiritual leadership role in their communities, whether formally or informally? From your vantage point as a chaplain, what is something practical that people can do with these ideas?
For spiritual leaders, I'll say two things. One is small, one is big. The small thing is do whatever it is you need to do to be able to hold yourself, to not push your feelings away, to not abandon yourself, to not abandon yourself to the emotions of this time, and to not abandon yourself by separating yourself from what it is you're actually feeling. So do what you can to get quiet and to enter into a place, a practice of compassion with yourself, of being with self for 1 minute, for 3 minutes, for 5 minutes. See what's possible when you sit with self, when you are present to yourself. And then I'll say for folks who are in visible role of spiritual leadership, for folks who are clergy, for decades now, the scientific community, the activist community has been shouting, our world is on fire, do something. And that urgency, that activation has become a part of our bodies, a part of our perception of what needs to happen, a part of what we feel is our moral guide to action. And so we have a tendency, for those of us who have pulpits or for those of us in community with folks who are listening to us, to take that alarm and be blaring like an alarm to our communities. We have to act. I don't know about you, but when people yell at me, I am not my best self. I become defensive. I become frightened. I become convinced of my own badness. So rather than engaging in what the climate psychologist Dr. Renee Lertzman calls telling, yelling, and selling around climate change, we need to be asking ourselves, how instead do I talk about climate change? Do I talk about climate action? Do I talk about climate emotions from a place of tending and from a place of mending and from a place of befriending?
Tending, mending, befriending.
Yes. Yeah.
That is beautiful guidance, Ora. That is beautiful, beautiful guidance. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with me in this conversation and for offering so much wisdom and such beautiful stories. I'm so grateful.
Thank you so much, Autumn. It has just been a treat to talk with you. I wish that the roles could have been reversed and that I could have spent an hour interviewing you, but I'm so grateful for the wisdom that you put out into the world. And I recognize the work and the effort and the heart that it takes. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this beautiful conversation with Rabbi Ora Nitkin-Kaner. There is still so much more to explore. So we're going to keep the conversation going. Next week on Climate Changed, you will get to hear my conversation with Autumn as we unpack the profound themes and ideas that Rabbi Ora raised today. We'll explore the vital work of climate chaplaincy and share some concrete next steps you can take in your own life and community. Make sure you're subscribed so you do not miss it. Autumn and I would love to hear from you. You can email us podcast@thebtscenter.org or leave us a voice message at 207-200-6986. We'd love to hear what ideas are sparking, what reflections are surfacing for you as you listen to this conversation.
You'll find bonus clips and video versions of our conversations on the BTS Center's YouTube channel. Subscribe there for extra material from Rabbi Ora and other guests.
As we draw to a close, I offer you this blessing. And I imagine wrapping you up in a warm blanket as I say it. May you know that you are loved, that you are worthy of love, just as you are. And may you know that you are capable of great love.
Coming up on the next episode of Climate Changed.
It's naming griefs. It's naming the climate realities that we're facing. Being honest is the most hopeful act. That is where we can gain some agency, is actually in being honest. And you have been at a podcast called How to Survive the End of the World for a long while, so I have a feeling. Yeah, I mean, just that putting in front of us, we're going to talk about how to survive the end of the world. That honesty is what sparks the naming, that sparks the connection in the depths.
Yes. Yes. Part of what we wanted to presence is that any one of us who is here on Earth at this moment in time is here as a result of ancestors who survived other endings.
Wow.
Which means that we actually have the capacity to survive and move through endings and come out on the other side changed and whole.
Join us as we continue exploring what it means to live, love, and lead in a climate-changed world.